All right, so hello. Right, okay, so we acknowledge that the land we're hosting from and meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by the Treaty 13, which is also known as the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, the Mississaugas, and the Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. We do this land acknowledgement as an expression of gratitude to the territory we're on and a way of honoring the Indigenous people who were on this land for many centuries before European settlers arrived. As immigrants and descendants of immigrants, we also benefit from living here, and so it's important for us to understand Canada's history of genocide and how Indigenous people still face injustice today because of it. Recognizing this history is a small step in being better allies to Indigenous communities. If you want to know more about the land that we are on, I'm going to post a link in the chat. It's called Whose Land. It lets you know, you can find out about the different Indigenous peoples who lived on the land. It's really cool. I encourage you to check that out. I'm also going to drop the ground rules in the chat. I'll just go over them really quickly. So here they are. So number one is engage in your own way. You can have the camera on or off, use the mic, or drop messages in the chat room. Take care of yourself. You can eat, drink, take a break, use the washroom. You can leave early if you need to, it's okay. Please practice confidentiality, so don't take screenshots and don't talk about folks that are in the room. If you need to have something to talk about, just leave the names out. Share the air, so raise your hand, speak one at a time. Again, you can drop a message in the chat if you want to speak. Listen with an open mind, be compassionate and kind, and respect that other people might be on a different journey than you. And please fill in the feedback form before you go. If you forgot, you can also email me and I can give it to you again. It's important for us to get the feedback so that way we can do this again and get funding. Okay, so with that, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today. It's Daniel Uy. And Daniel's a graduate student in queer anthropology. He weaves stories and information on health, wellness, spirituality through positionality and how sexual, gender, and racial identifications may intersect to produce different relationships to or ideas about bodily ideals and physique. He's also a Toronto-based yoga teacher and practitioner. He teaches several different styles of yoga throughout the city, and more information about his work can be found on his website, which I will also post in the chat. And he has been living with HIV since 1997. Daniel has a lighthearted approach to life and is an eternal optimist. So yeah, that's Daniel. Welcome, Daniel. Thanks for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I guess I wanted to ask you first if you could tell us a little bit about your story and how you came into the fitness industry, as well as maybe your research.
Sure. Yeah, so I would have to start, if I was starting at the beginning, I would have to start when I became HIV positive. I was 21 years old. So I'm 46 now. September, God willing, will be 25 years that I've been HIV positive. So it's more than half my life. It was when I was sick and dealing with complications from side effects of medication. Medication had just come out around when I became positive, and some of it was pretty horrific on the body. And so it was dealing with some of the side effects that I ended up getting into health and fitness. Specifically, I was in hot yoga, and it sort of branched from there into other things. It was later in my 30s that I ended up going to a yoga training and becoming a certified yoga instructor, and then really just sort of delving into that area of my life. And it just sort of blossomed. I was writing for positivelight.com. They had asked me to write about health and wellness, and it gave me like a taste for like expressing myself or ideas and things that I was interested in, which sort of led to the idea of going back to school. And so it was a combination of like working in a gym, teaching yoga, and like going back to school, where I started really going into anthropology, studying people, and now I'm a master's student in queer anthropology at York University. And my research is based on queer racialized men within health and fitness. So I think when you take something that you enjoy and then you get to spend more time studying it, it just makes it a lot more interesting. and also just making sure that like I'm still stepping back and I'm not like focused on my own perspective, but allowing the people or participants or other voices to come through so that we get to really learn. Not everyone has the same experience. Even those that have the same identities would have the same perception of how those things play out. Yeah.
Did you, so prior to you, I said, I guess you said that you got into fitness after you got HIV. So
after I tested positive. Yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
yes, and sorry. And so that wasn't like a big part of your life before then?
I would say no. I was a pretty chubby kid in high school. I would say that I was into math. Not a stereotype. I was a math major, and I was because it was encouraged that I go into math. My father, I'm biracial. My father is Asian. My mother is Caucasian. And it was encouraged that I go into mathematics or become a doctor, and it wasn't working. I mean, I was good at it, but just because you're good at something doesn't mean you should do it. You know, there's a lot of things that I'm good at, but it's not something that I'm interested in. So I was not really interested in fitness before that, and it sort of came up accidentally later on in life. Yeah, for sure.
So I guess you touched on this a little bit, but in that you were saying that medications were really hard on your body at the time. But I was wondering if you could also speak a little bit about what it was like to test positive for HIV in the 90s, and what other issues you faced then, and how things have changed for you now living as a person with HIV today.
Yeah, I had just recently come out of the closet at 1920, and I lost a bunch of weight, and then I suddenly became like slimmer. So I went from being really chubby to being like slim, and then I asked to get if I wanted to go into modeling. And so my life changed very abruptly, like all of a sudden entering like the gay community, which basically was bathhouses, bars, and clubs. I think we have more to offer, or there was more to offer then. I don't know if I saw it, but the gay community was basically going out and drinking and having sex, and that was it. And so in that world, the aesthetic was more prevalent. And so I got slimmer, and then I suddenly became more desirable. And through all that drinking, early drinking, I became HIV positive. I was at a photo shoot, and I was incredibly sick. They were shooting black and white. And so it was okay that I looked pale. Like heroin chic was in the late 90s. So I was on point. So but then later, after that shoot was done, I ended up in the hospital. I went to emerge. My parents came. They took my blood, and I found out, I think a week later, my family doctor called me in and told me I was HIV positive. And he said it in a way that I've never forgotten. He was like, it doesn't matter how you got it, and we just have to deal with it. And I've never forgotten that. Of course, I didn't believe him at the time, but somehow I got the idea, and I'm not sure, I doubt that someone actually said this to me, but I swear that when I was in the hospital in the emergency room, I heard that I wasn't going to live past 27. But they could have said like bed 27 needs ice. Like I have no idea, right? Like I don't know. I swear that I heard it, but in hindsight, I don't think anyone actually said this to me. And so that gave me about a 6-year life expectancy at that time. And so I did not deal with it well. I didn't really aim or aspire to be anything. I just got drunk and high a lot and feel sorry for myself, I would say. At 27 is when I did end up becoming not just HIV positive, but like I had full-blown AIDS for the first time when I was 27. I weighed about 145 pounds. I was pretty much dying. Medication had shifted. I started to try to fight back for my life. And then for a bit, through this period, I did fail to mention that I ended up with a drug addiction and alcoholic problem. I didn't know that I had that problem prior to that, but through that period of time, really drowned or tried to medicate myself so that I wouldn't have to feel, for lack of a better phrase. For a period of time when I was 27, I put everything down to try to get my health together. And then I did. I actually fought back for my life. I felt like I was Forrest Gump, like the shackles were broken off my ankles and I could run. I was doing a lot of cross-country running because I was now suddenly built for cross-country running. And then I ran like a 5 or 10K race, like around Pride Day or the Pride and Remembrance Run. They have it every Toronto. And then I finished the race. And then I was just kind of like, I did it. Like I'm inspiration. I'm very inspiring. And I always hate hearing that phrase. Like, because if it's not inspiring to do action, is it actually inspiration? Is where my thinking goes. But I finished the race. And then I was like, what do I do with myself now? And so I just went back to what I was doing. And then my life got worse. Like I didn't think it could get any worse than it was. And so I was just drinking and drugging and like trying to bury my pain or my sorrow. Until I was 30 and then really just had to like turn everything around. And so that's when I got help. I became more open about like, I was struggling with addiction in alcoholism. I got help in therapy. I got like support for that, and then really started to grow in life from that point on. Yeah. It's been 15 years now that I've been clean and sober, and I practice abstinence. Not that that's required for everybody, but that's what works for me. Yeah.
By abstinence, you mean abstinence from substances?
Abstinence from substance. Yeah. I try not to alter myself mentally or emotionally with drugs or alcohol, gas, liquid, or solid. Yeah. But not abstinent from sex. Oh my God, no. I tried that. I actually tried that for the first couple of years of my sobriety and recovery because I thought that maybe the alcohol made me gay. So I thought if I just didn't do anything, I would be fine. I could just be the straight man that I am. It didn't work.
I mean, I'm sure alcohol makes some people gay. For temporarily.
There was you know what it is? I thought that maybe the alcohol made you gay, but it never occurred to me that maybe I have to drink and I have to use drugs to really drown the internalized homophobia that I feel towards myself, that it can finally be quiet and I don't feel the shame or the judgment to be myself. But I can only do that when I'm intoxicated. And so how do I learn how to do that without a drink or a drug in my system? And that state of social acceptance of myself and just peeling those layers of internalized homophobia off really is when I became more free. Yeah. And I would say that happened in my early 30s. Yeah. Yeah. So I came back so there was a period there where I thought I was straight. And then you're like, oops, my bad. I'm not. And then I came back out of the closet again. And the second time has really stuck. So I'm still good. Still good. Yeah.
Also, thank you for. I mean, we've talked a bunch before, but I also want to thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story with everybody in the room today. As I know that this is quite a lot of layers to experiences.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and you know what? I never not get tired of sharing it. I think it's one of the stupidest things that when I look at it, I'm like, God, that's such a stupid story, and it's my story, and I own that, and I love it because it's like. I love sometimes like I was this delusional, you know what I mean? And you look back and you're like owning that and you're like how to grow from that point is really freeing, right? Yeah.
There's so many things that I want to ask you. So I just want to do a sidetrack.
Sure.
You said that when you were working through alcoholism and substance use and getting support for your HIV status, what services were you accessing? Services? What did that support look like?
It was a really strange time because when I became HIV positive in the 90s, I was young. I was really young, and they didn't have youth services like SOI and all the other HIV youth services didn't exist yet. And I was too old for the other groups, but and then when they did start the youth groups, I was too old for those, but I was too young for the other ones. I was in middle place. Even after when I cleared a decade of being HIV positive, I thought I'd go to an old timers, like a survivors meeting. And I was like, I was a decade or two younger than everybody else, but I'd been HIV positive longer than all of them. And then you're just, I don't find any of this relatable. And so it was kind of like carving your own path. And I feel like, being biracial, being queer, some of the identities that are part of my life, I've always been like, I have to carve my own path. There isn't really a lot of people I can emulate or people that I can follow. I did reach out to a lot of HIV or service HIV organizations at that time. So it was mostly just ACT and PWA that really existed in the 90s at that period that I was aware of. It was a struggle sometimes to, like, again, find that connection within those organizations for help. Even still, that's probably why ACAS exists. You've gone to some of, wow, I can't, I'm going to stop myself. No, if you've ever gone to PW or ACT, you're like, wow, you're the only Asian in the room and it feels really odd. And you're just kind of like, why is that happening? Yeah, I can say that. I'm going to say, I've said it. It's done. It's been said.
Yeah. It is kind of interesting. It's kind of cool. I was just having a conversation with somebody from Australia who works in sexual health, and he was saying that he was visiting here in Toronto, and he was saying how cool it is that we are able to have so many different culturally specific community organizations that really work to make messaging relevant to members of their community, because apparently they don't quite have that in the same way. Funding doesn't work out in the same way where he's from. So
in Australia too, which is really funny because they have a very large queer Asian community there. It's quite massive, actually, and also still segregated away from a lot of their mainstream community. I've read quite a few research papers, and I've talked to some queer researchers in Australia that are working in queer anthropology with gay Asian, queer Asian men. And yeah, they have a very thriving community. I find that really odd that they wouldn't have their own space.
We should talk about that later. There were a lot of things. That
oh my God! Yeah. Yeah, especially when the recording's off. Then yeah.
I want to ask a little bit more about how people responded to when you disclosed your status, or maybe how were you doing disclosure back then, and versus now, and did you have to adjust how you negotiated sex with people? Has that changed? Yeah, I'm curious about like how people responded to it when you wanted to hook up and meet people.
Yeah. I would say that it's sort of like a second coming out. To phrase it in a way, not all cultures believe in coming out. There's a tacit subject, and some cultures believe in that. But it does feel like, in a lot of ways, or the only way to describe it is like a second coming out. In the 90s, it was still a death sentence. Like, even with the medication coming up, it was still a gamble that it will work or not work. And so there was a really kind of like, when I was, the periods and times in my life where I've been more quiet about it or down low with my status, I had far more complications than when I was upfront from the very beginning.
Complications?
Yeah, like you like someone and they like you, and then you're like making out, or you accidentally, slip it into each other, and then you haven't said anything, and then you're later on, and also it was illegal too. Like, and this is really, if you had sex in the 90s or even early 2000s, and you didn't disclose ahead of time, it was illegal to do that. Yeah. And so you weren't even allowed to talk about it. We weren't even allowed to have discussions about the fact that you slept with someone and that you didn't tell them, that you didn't disclose. That would be considered an illegal act. So, and it was more targeted toward queer people, queer men, than it was and trans women, than it was the rest of the population. So yeah, there was a really weird, like, I don't want to go to jail, but I also want you to like me. And so what do I do? Kind of thing. I would say that a lot of that those barriers and that uncomfortability might have been the reason why I was drinking and using at that time too. Like that kind of, there's a lot to navigate when I haven't even accepted it myself. How do I tell a bunch of other people that, yeah. I would say that when social media and dating apps came on phones, the same thing. I think I was quiet about it initially, but the moment that I went public about it, where I just put like, I was gonna say back in the day, like I haven't been on dating apps for a few years now. But they used to be like a bracket, a plus sign and a bracket. It's been 3 years for me, 3 or 4 years. We just had an anniversary. So I think it's 3 years. But when I publicly put that out there, it really kind of vetted a lot of my problems, I would have to say. A lot of people are like, oh no, it might, like, people might stigmatize me, or they might shame me, or people might know. But at the same time, it was kind of like people who are not public about their HIV status now suddenly will see you and they go, ooh, look at that guy. Like, he's public about it. And then they'll slip into your messages and be like, they'll let you know, like really like secretive or quiet about it, or people start asking you questions, like you become somehow an HIV advocate and you didn't mean to be. Now you're like the one HIV positive person that person knows. But it also vetted a lot of other things, like people who are racist, people who are like mask for mask, people who like are ableist. A lot of those ism people, once they see the plus sign, it vets them. They leave you alone and you don't have to talk to them ever again. And it's so freeing. And I think I was telling you this before, like anyone who starts a question with what's your background, like block, I'm done. I don't want, my status says I'm mixed race, I'm biracial. If you need to know what my mix is before we talk, I don't need to talk to you. Like, why does it matter? Like, but then what also it did too is that it let people know where I was beforehand. And so people who are messaging me already did their research. They read it and they are still interested in me. And there are people in conversations and sexcapades that I've had in the past 8 years, 10 years, where I never had to bring up that I was HIV positive. I think I felt obligated to still. I'll be like, oh, by the way, I'm HIV positive. I figure you already read it, but like, we should just, and you're like, oh, and the other person was like, oh, okay. And that's it. That's the conversation. And it's so freeing, especially knowing that my undetectable status means that I'm untransmittable, and knowing that other people know that too kind of takes a lot of the conversation out. I would say the one thing that was really awkward or odd, which was a real surprise to me, was I think it was about 6, 7 years ago when PrEP started coming out a lot more, where even people who are casual acquaintances of mine, like they used to date like a good friend of mine. They'd be like, hey, Daniel, hope you're doing well. Just so you know, I'm on PrEP now, just so you know. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. They're like, yeah, I just thought you should know. And I'm like, why should I know? Why would, oh, okay. All right. What are you doing Thursday? Like, it was a shock to me because I'm like, wait, are people hitting on me now because they know that they're safe with me? Because they're on PrEP and they know I know my status and I'm on something, that they feel safe with me. Because before I always thought I was a threat. Like I was always like, make sure you're wearing a condom. You might kill them. To like, everyone wants to come now because they know that I know what I am. You know what I mean? And there's something really confident about that. And there's something really assuring that it turns something that was always a negative to me toward a positive, pun intended. And so I would say that was a really interesting mix.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot less of this idea that people who are HIV positive or even have any sort of STI are irresponsible, or they're getting something that they deserve, that thankfully we're kind of like leaving behind. But then I think actually like the kinds of people who can be open and attentive and engaged with their sexual health in that way are usually people who are very, very responsible and knowledgeable on prevention. Mm-hmm. And they're the ones who are actually like, I don't know, I personally feel a lot more secure and safe around people who can be like, you know, my last test was a month ago, or I'm taking these treatments and I'm undetectable, or these are the conversations that we're having around sexual health. It's like, okay, this person has the language, they're used to communicating about it. They're probably somebody who, you know, who's getting tested regularly and knows stuff about their own health and is on top of it. I mean, I don't want to make too many generalizations, but I think that, you know, in terms of reversing that narrative and that stigma, it's nice to think that we're moving to a place where it's okay to talk about it and there's less shame, because the more you talk about it and the more you're engaged with it, right? Like, I think that there's something neat there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, when I was not expecting that. Like, I was not expecting that kind of reaction, honestly. I was like, I just need to do this for me. I was not expecting I wasn't sure how the world was going to accept it, but like, for me, I want everyone to know that I'm HIV positive. Everyone knows, like, I talk about me being a biracial. It's on there. It says mixed race. I'm not like Caucasian on the streets and then like, or like biracial on the streets to get what I want and then Caucasian in the sheets. Like, I'm not trying to like lie to like get ahead. So it's like, I want that out there. So if people are screening for white, then I'm not going to be on the list. And I want that to be there. And when I found that, like you said, like, it just sort of elevated or deepened the conversations ahead of time that I had to have with people. So all this running around, it's sort of like when you're still in the closet with your sexuality, and then you're trying to be on the down low and the weird sexcapades that you have and trying to navigate that. Whereas when you're upfront and open about it, how it's easier to navigate some of those things. I would say the same thing on a deeper level when it comes to HIV status. Yeah.
This is one little side question before I want to switch topics. But I feel like when I was younger, pre-prep, there was a lot more of a discourse around serosorting, where people who are HIV negative only sleep with people who are HIV negative, or people who are HIV positive sleep with other positive people. And I feel like that doesn't seem to be as prevalent as it used to be. And I'm wondering if you feel the same way.
I would say that I still know quite a few people. I would say I'm going to call them old guard, for lack of a better word. I don't think that's actually what it's called. But I've been HIV positive now for 25 years. People who are multiple statuses, who have been for a couple decades, there's quite a few that just only exclusively are with only other HIV positive people that I know of. They won't even consider. I guess because of past hurt or past problems, or I don't know. But I do know that why would I want to limit myself or pick someone who is only like me? Like, I already mentioned that I'm biracial and I'm HIV positive. So that means I'm only allowed to sleep with another biracial HIV positive person. How many more can there be? Like, that's so limiting to like what I can, the buffet that I can eat at is limiting the amounts that I can access. And I don't want to do that to myself.
Thank you. So I feel like we're about halfway through, and I feel like I don't want to fixate too much on just talking about HIV, although I think it's a really fascinating conversation. I'd like to move to talk a little bit more about, because you have so many different layers of intersecting identity, and you know, this workshop is about body positivity. So I'm curious about you know, when you move through the world and you've got all these layers, rich layers of history and identity, and the world and people in the world see you in a certain way, or they respond to you in a certain way, do you push back? How do you push back? And where are the places where you find joy in the body that you're in, despite all that?
Yeah. So as an adult, I have been 145 pounds. I've been 300 pounds. Quite recently, just this past winter, I was up to 300. Grad school and stress and the pandemic, with inactivity, not going out as much or working outside the home, also having full-blown AIDS, also high drug addict and full-blown AIDS simultaneously. The navigation of those. Also, I've been, I'm not Asian enough, and I've also been too Asian looking to not be able to be white. So I've been like, I know what it's like to have these like contradicting identities at the same time in embodying the same space. I would say that the pushback is the truth will set you free. And there's something really just simple about saying everything without explaining it. Like, I'm HIV positive. I'm half Asian. I'm an ex-drug addict, an alcoholic. I'm a grad student right now, like, and these are things that I am and things that I'm doing. But I have no control over that. This is the cards that I have now, and I'm working with that. It was funny when I was in my undergrad, because I'm 46 and I'm in my undergrad and I'm in class with people who I'm older than their parents. I'm working on a project. We're going to call her Sarah. And Sarah is 18 and we're working on projects on Sunday night, and I'm calling her house at 11 p.m. And I'm like, I feel like I need to gay it up so that her parents don't think I'm trying like some sort of sex pervert. Like, I just I need Sarah's parents to know that I'm gay. It's just like, just in case, like, it's a really weird thing. And it's such a wonderful gift as well. I never thought I would ever live this long. And if you are fortunate enough to get to live to 46, I would hope that you get to experience life in the many colors that exist. But like, what's life without whimsy? Like, and not having this like joy of things, and sort of, is this the way that I would have planned it? No. Is this what I would have chosen for myself? At many times, this is not what I would have picked. But it's what it is. And when you go along for the ride, it's a lot more easier to do. Yeah. I think I've embraced Taoism way too much, and I apologize for that.
Well, I mean, it almost sounds like what you're, if you allow me to reflect back, it kind of almost sounds like you're saying pushing back for you looks like embracing and owning all these different rich layers of your own identity. And that is actually where you are finding the joy in your own body. Like, just being like, this is who I am. And like,
yeah,
those parts are exciting and they're complicated, and they sometimes they're in conflict with each other and you have mixed feelings, but that's also kind of what makes you uniquely you. If that's sort of what it sounds like to me, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, like, for example, like even right now, like I weigh about 240 pounds. The first time I weighed 240 pounds, I was working out. I had a breakup in 2014 and I was working out like crazy, and I packed on a lot of muscle, and I was 240 pounds and I was like, I am like the Hulk. I can destroy anything. I could pick anybody up. I'm unstoppable. But now I just came back from 300. So now I'm down to 240. And now I'm waist paper thin. I could slide through doors. I could slip underneath this laptop and slide out the other side unscathed. Like, and so our perception of weight, our perception of size, and our perception of our body really changes on our experience and where we come from. And we can control that. I can control it by changing my perspective on my reality. I can control what it looks like. At one point in my life, I thought this was a Hulk. Right now, I think it's waist paper thin. I am living my spelt skinny life at 240, right? And that's just what it is. Ironically, it's the same shirt. I put the shirt on specifically. I like this shirt. I used to think I looked like the Hulk in this shirt, and now it's my skinny shirt. So I don't know. But really kind of embracing like my body and my health and where it looks like today is really just sort of loving the man that I see in the mirror and knowing that I have his back, right?
I think that's really beautiful. Can you share some of the things that help ground yourself on days when you are feeling less confident in your body or less confident with your identity?
Yeah, I call it like a mirror meditation. And so what I do and what I've practiced to get to a place of self-acceptance, not one where my ego, like I think I'm everything in the world, and it's not like also something that I share publicly. It's not something I post on Instagram or like social media. It's a self thing for me. And so I'll just basically look into my own eyes in a mirror or reflection, and then I will just stare at myself, or I'll gaze at myself. And then I will say a compliment. And I will hit on myself or give myself a compliment. Like, you look nice today. I really like your beard, like, just, I don't want to do it. I think it's the corniest thing that I do. And I always do it for me. And then sometimes I'll just catch my reflection. I'm like, how you doing? What's going on? You doing well? Maybe I'll see you later. Maybe I'll see you later in the bedroom. And I'm like, I'm talking to me. My partner's not home. Nobody else is around. No one else knows it's happening, but I know it's happening. And I'm flirting with myself, and I'm complimenting myself, and I'm looking myself in my own eyes, and uplifting myself. And there's something about that when you look into your own eyes and you learn to love the person that you see, it starts to change your perspective. Initially, it felt like I had an ego, but what I've come to realize, it's just I'm right sizing the way that I see myself. I don't think I'm everything in the world for everybody, but I think I'm pretty good. And I like myself, and I like the person that I have become. It's not who I would have chose, but I like who he is. On most days, he's pretty decent. And then there are the other days where you're like, I shouldn't have done that. That was a bad thing. Tomorrow we need to make that right. Because I don't, when you go to bed at night, I want to like the person that I am. I want to like the person that I see in the mirror. I don't want to avoid my own reflection when I'm brushing my teeth. You know what I mean? Like when I used to do a lot of blow, like I'm doing it off of mirrors and I can't even make eye contact with myself. That's fucked up. So I want to be able to look at the person that I see in the mirror. The other thing too, I talked about was this idea of honored health, where again, it's outside of what other people think or what other people feel or other people's opinions. It's like, what do I want for my life? What works? What do I want? Or what are the values that are important to me, for me? You know what I mean? And no one else has to know. And then whatever I choose, whatever my motive is for why I want to do what I want to do is for me. That when I wake up and then I go into my day, that I honor that. And so I call it this idea of honored health, where I'm honoring the decisions I've made for my own health, for me, by me, and that I'm not going against that. So it has nothing to do with anybody else's opinion. It has nothing else to do with what other people think. It's very much my own opinion of how I should live my life for me. And it's tough sometimes because you can really be influenced by other people, especially if everyone around you is living a very specific way, like I talked about, in the gay community or partying or drinking, that sometimes people can fall into a different way of thinking and the majority seems to rule. And when you're surrounded by it, you feel like if you're not living like them, that you're somehow failing. And that's when I always have to come back to, well, what do I want for me? What do I want my health to look like? What do I want my life to look like, regardless of other people's opinions? And then how can I navigate that to ensure that, again, at the end of the day, that I'm looking myself in the eyes and I'm confident and proud of the person that I was. Yeah.
Thank you. I was just thinking too that there's this moment that you talked about, the mirror meditation, and I was thinking about this scene that I had seen between Mindy Kaling and Laverne Cox, where it's like the best friend practice, where Mindy Kaling, Laverne Cox is like, what do you see in the mirror when you look at yourself? And Mindy Kaling goes, oh, I see a fat cow in a jumpsuit. And Laverne Cox is like, that's really harsh. Would you say that to your best friend? And I think, and she goes, you're looking at your best friend. Your best friend is you in the mirror, And I think that sometimes we can be really generous and really compassionate and very loving and so supportive when it's someone other than ourselves, because we've internalized so much stuff about ourselves that we can't possibly have the same kind of loving perspective on our own bodies. And then it's reminding yourself that you're actually the person that has to live in your body every day until you die. It's you. And if you can't treat yourself in your own body as your best friend, you're going to be in trouble. We have to learn how to appreciate ourselves the way that we appreciate our best friends, because you would never say something like that that's your best friend, right? So why does it make it okay that we can do this to ourselves? I think that's so fascinating how we have these ideas of our own self-image that become so twisted and very harsh. It's really unfortunate.
I agree. Yeah. And so that's why I think it's always been a valuable thing. I don't do it as often as I used to, but it was definitely something to get through or break through sort of this barrier of this block of self-esteem, but also the dysphoria, seeing your body in a very specific or inspecific way. And then navigating that, I found it a lot more freeing. when I was finally able to just like look at my own eyes in the mirror. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes not even saying anything. If you can hold that gaze for 3 minutes, that's pretty powerful because you're looking into your own eye. And I would say to do it with nobody else around. If you wanted my opinion on it, whether that mattered or not, but I would do it with nobody else around. No one else needs to know. You don't need to discuss it. It's really just a journey that you take with you. Do you know what I mean? And I think it folds in really well, especially when you look at the next couple of days of workshops. Like tomorrow, we're talking about sexual health and sex and sexuality. It's really hard to be with someone sexually when you don't like the person that you are. You know, if you can't get out of your own way, how can you be there for somebody else in bed or whatever device you're using? It's really hard to do all those things when you're still navigating and fighting inside yourself. I don't believe it's like a RuPaul thing where someone else's love can help fix you. Not that saying that loving someone can't help heal or create space for them, but really this kind of journey of self-acceptance comes from you, nobody else.
I love that. Okay, if you'll thank you so much. Yeah, I love that this conversation around health also goes beyond the physical, but also we're touching on the sexual health and the mental health and even spiritual health piece too. So my next question is around when people think about health and wellness, I think that that phrase can come with a lot of really heavy baggage. Like I think there's like pressure to look a certain way or to feel a certain way or to be, and it's tough for if you have a disability, if you have an eating disorder, if you have body dysmorphia, it's like very tough to meet an external standard of having top form health and wellness that most people only have for a very small portion of their lives anyway, even if they have it at all. And I think it's not realistic or accessible for people because there's time that you need to have, there's money, there's knowledge around all the things that you need to be healthy and well. So I'm given that there are many different ways to engage in health and wellness in your life, I'm really wondering what would you recommend for people who want to connect with that in their own way, knowing that people kind of like will have their own journey or they'll have a whole different feelings about it. Like, I mean, you must have clients also who are coming at it with different kind of baggage or a different, association around health and wellness. So how do you encourage people to connect with that?
That's a really great question. I was actually talking to someone on Monday and they were talking about white wellness. And I was like, okay, yeah. And it's a $1 billion industry. And like you said, money, time, effort, also the aesthetic that they're aiming for and this ideal is a white-bodied subject. And that doesn't always fit for everybody that's not white. And what I would say for that is like, turn all that stuff off. That would be my first thing. If you are heavily influenced by like body dysphoria or like trying to look a specific way and you're obsessing about it, you need to unfollow all of those people today. You need to remove them. If you are like, there's a person whose body you just love and you're looking at all their pictures, you need to remove them immediately from all your devices. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is, you need to remove them because all it's going to do is feed the thing that's killing you, right? That's maiming you. And you need to stop that. That would be a start. Coming back to, and this is why I talked about honored health, like going back to your own motive of what you want for you and why you're doing what you're doing for you. I'm not saying that there's a hierarchy of motives, but knowing your motive of why we're doing what we're doing is a really great place to start because then you get to see, it starts to unpack a whole different thing where you start to open up and see and look at why it is that we're doing what you're doing. Because then you can start to find out. Once you uncover that, and discover it, then you can get rid of the parts that don't fit for what your ideal is for you. But a lot of heartache and headache comes from this misplaced opportunity or trying to compare to other people of what works, right? A lot of them have gimmicks or tricks or some special secret recipe or sauce, and I would say that there isn't one. I've found most assuring is picking what works best for me and trying to stick to that. You know what I mean? And not everyone needs to know what it is. I don't really publicize. I'm terrible at like social media. It's crazy, but I don't really talk a lot about certain things because I just don't feel like it's everybody's business, if that makes sense. Even my weight loss, and just recently lost like 60, 70 pounds. I don't think everyone needs to know that because I don't want anyone to think that I didn't like the person I was when I was 300 pounds. There are certain people who are like, yay, look at you've done so great. But I'm like, but I was great then. I'm the same guy that I was then and I am now. I was just in a different body. I put a layer of protection on myself because I was nervous as fuck about getting COVID and dying. Now I don't need that layer of protection anymore. And I can go into the world feeling a little bit more safe. Do you know what I mean? And so really knowing what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing is a really great start at fixing our own, or not fixing, but like really honoring our own health and our own, what you said, wellness. Yeah. Did that answer the question, or did I just?
Yeah, kind of. I guess I'd like to dive a little. I'd like to dive a little bit deeper. So, for a person who doesn't know what health and wellness looks like for them yet, or they don't have any goals yet, how do you encourage people to find that and to listen to themselves and to find? Because you were talking about honored health, right? But if you maybe for some folks that they don't have the language or even the idea of what that's supposed to look like for them specifically. So I'm kind of curious about how to encourage listening to the body and listening to your values.
Yeah, well, I would start with we all have 24 hours in a day. Some of that should be used for sleeping. And some of it we use for working, and then you have the other time. What do you want to do? And I guess it's a big thing. Like, what do you want to do with your life? I never thought I would live this. Like I said this earlier, I didn't think I'd live this long. I thought I was going to be dead at 27. Apparently, I lived longer. And then you're like, okay, so if I'm going to live, and potentially, and I'm undetectable now, and I might live to 70, I have a reasonably good life. What do I want to do for the next 30 years? You know, like, look, I never thought I'd have that time. So what do I want to do with it? And so when you start looking at that, you can only focus on so many things. You can't do everything. So you have to pick, right? And so by picking, you start to eliminate some of the other choices, but you start to narrow in on what you enjoy. And then you pick something. Say I want to join like soccer, or is soccer coming? No, rugby. There's the gay rugby league. I know they were just in Ottawa, I heard, for a big championship. Maybe I want to join that. Then the tryouts probably start in September. Then that's going to eat up a lot of time, practice time, work, and then they have social events. There's a whole culture around queer sport teams. So then that's an extra amount of time that I'm going to need to do that. So you have to plan that all out. But then by picking that, I can't really join something else. Do you know what I mean? So, and then if I don't like it, I can stop doing it and do something else. I don't now have to do rugby now until I die. I can quit. Sometimes quitting is the best thing to do. It's like I learned in a short amount of time that this doesn't work for me. And I learned it really quickly. That's good. That means now I can spend the rest of my life doing something else that I enjoy more. And picking those things and giving ourselves permission to pick those things is really kind of freeing. And by taking a leap and step out, you start to explore areas that you don't normally get to explore. It's like, what does health mean? What does wellness mean? Does it like just mean drinking more water or sleeping better or eating better? I don't know. But I think each of us should pick that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. I love this idea of reimagining health and wellness, or reimagining that question as being like, how do you want to spend your time? I think that's really special, because I think a lot of people, it can be hard to imagine their goals or what health and wellness is supposed to look like. But I think everybody knows, like, how whether they're feeling joyous and nourished and enjoying their lives. And when you think about the amount of time that we spend doing things that don't really nourish us, like health and wellness maybe is something that allows us to having a healthy balance or a work-life balance, like that can be part of health and wellness because it allows us to spend more time doing things that we like in a sustainable way. So I think that's a really lovely way of putting that. So thank you.
Can I answer Pri's question really quickly? So Pri wrote, do you think there is a way to lose weight in a way that isn't inherently fat phobic?
I would say I'm gonna cut that out of the video. So let's not use people's names because I'm recording, but I'll cut that out. So let's answer the question, but yeah, don't use the names. Thanks.
Sorry. So there was a question. That was my fault. Do you think there was a way to lose weight in a way that isn't inherently fat phobic? And I would say that there is. Again, like we were just talking about, it comes down to motive. Why am I doing what I'm doing? You know what I mean? Am I doing it because I hate who I am? Am I doing it because, I don't know, using hatred in order to self-motivate myself is not something that I tap into anymore. It doesn't work for me. I tend to go a little bit more, not that I'm saying that negative emotions can't be beneficial, it just doesn't work for me anymore. But wanting to change myself or challenge myself to move to a different way does. And I'm not saying that the way that I was wrong. It's just the way that I want to move is this direction. And it means I'm going to have to give some of that away, right? So I do believe that there is a way to do it that isn't meeting on the before picture, if that makes sense. I love the person that I was. Like even in early sobriety, when I was like fucked up and crazy and I was insane and I'd be like crying and laughing and then angry and then crying and then happy again, all within like 30 seconds. And then sitting down and realizing that one day this might be the worst that I am mentally, and that I might be like more like intellectually and spiritually sound where I won't be as moved by things around me. Like, I love that. I look back that almost like it was like my spiritual baby years, like in a lot of ways, my early sobriety felt like my baby years. And I was just like, I don't ever want to give this up. I love that I was oblivious. Like, I love that I'd walk into situations completely self-absorbed and then realize later, like, oh, that wasn't a surprise party for me. It was for some, like, that was just, anyway. But I don't ever want to lose that or miss those wonderful times, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Maybe
so, go ahead.
Maybe there's something there, if you'll allow me to chime in, around what we were talking about, where, when we turn that loving and compassionate eye on previous versions of ourselves, then that's a way to honor and be grateful for where the direction that we're moving in. Like I think, as you said, it can be a hard practice to appreciate and be grateful for someone that we want to move away from. But I think that's sort of the best way to integrate, like all the different parts of yourself that you were before getting to this place. I mean, that can be a really complicated and ambivalent journey, but I think like they all result in you. They're all part of you, right? They all exist in you.
Like when I was 32 to 33, I thought I was straight. I ended up even getting a girlfriend, and we were holding hands at the gay Starbucks at Church in Wellesley, talking about dinner plans and things. And you're like, so delusional. I love him. My ringtone was "Please Don't Stop the Music" by Rihanna, just like every other straight man. You know what I mean? Like, my work badge had glitter and like purple feathers and blue glitter, like other straight men did on their work badges. Like, I love how and everyone in my life, and I'm so grateful that all the people in my life completely applauded and supported the fact that I figured out that I was straight, even though they all knew I was completely and utterly delusional. I just love that. And so I never want to shit on the guy that I was, because the mistakes that he made and the life things that he figured out helped shape the man that I am. And I'm so happy for those things, or I wouldn't be asked to be a part of this. I'd still be like, I'd be still a mess. So, yeah, I think that honoring those things and figuring out your health and figuring out your mentally, it really does come down to, what do you want to do with your life? Where are you focused at? Where are you going to go? Because when we can ground that, then I know what direction I'm moving, and then I know what I can do for myself that can help me meet those objectives. Like, I only started eating better because I was teaching a lot of hot yoga, and I was realizing I'm sweating a lot in hot yoga, and and I'm doing a lot of stretching, and I'm in a really hot environment, and my body is really limber. And I'm like, I need to balance this out with some strength training so that my body isn't constantly feeling weak. So then I started lifting weights, but then I was like, I need to eat more like protein, or I need to drink more water to balance out. I'm constantly feeling dehydrated. So then it was always this growing and figuring things out on my own, not because other people told me, but because of my own experience living the life that I had, helped me make decisions for the life that I had. Yeah. And that's why I don't want to tell anyone, or like, well, you should do this or you shouldn't do that. Like, I am nobody's parole officer. I am a fellow inmate in this life. And I'm trying to make it, I don't know.
Also, so it's 8:05. Thank you so much, Daniel. So I want to open up the floor to other questions. If people have any questions, you can put them in the chat if you don't want to ask them out loud. But yeah, we're happy to continue the conversation if people have things that they'd like to know. This has been such a very rich and multi-layered conversation that we're having. I'm really having a good time.
Putting my old man glasses on
Ariana Grande's Motive right now as background music.
You have what?
Oh, I was just making a joke about you when you were asking what's your motive. Just like
Ariana Grande. And that's a singer? My old people glasses on. What?
Oh, you know what? Okay. I have a question that I don't think
sure.
I've had. So this was like I wrote a whole preamble. So today we are so blasted with imagery and ideas of pride, and I think that word has lost some meaning, and that everybody says pride, but I think it's become so many things to so many people, and I think previously pride was such a response to shame, right? About like, we're going to come out of the closet, we're going to leave behind shame, and it's going to be about pride. And I think that pride now encompasses this thing that's very corporate, and it's just like for everybody. It's not even just for queers. Pride is for everyone. And what does that even mean anymore? But I think that there's still a lot of us that struggle with shame, even though that's not part of the conversation anymore. So I'm wondering what you think about queer shame and how shame motivates us to make certain decisions. Because you had mentioned before that shame is not the greatest motivator for you, but like, how does it affect our decision making? And maybe particularly in terms of like our sexual decision making, our partners, our habits, our.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I mean, pride and shame are the same coin, right? And they're the same coin, different sides. A lot of my research actually right now is on pride. Queer racialized men in health and fitness, around pride festivities, around pride celebrations and events. What I found in talking about it, and you were talking about shame as well. I think of it a lot as humility, personally, where the acceptance of it is just as it is. It doesn't need to be flaunted. Neither is it hidden. It just is, and true humility is like, there's no explaining and there's no complaining. It just exists. And owning that is where the strength comes from. And I find that a better place for me to exist. But yeah, there are definitely places where I felt shame or felt ashamed within the community, with all the different multi-layers of identity, the intersectionality of where I exist, even just different pieces of them, being HIV positive, in and around like being hypersexual, being racialized or not racialized, in biracial existence, living in separate communities and a part of them, and neither included or excluded, but like the space between them. And feeling bad about that, like feeling bad about the fact that I'm not Asian enough to go to an Asian queer night, but it is a really weird thing. You know what I mean? Why am I suddenly feeling bad about that? That's a very strange feeling to come up. Well, shouldn't I feel more included? Or it's sometimes the idea of like having to prove one's existence. Like when you come out of the closet and say you're gay, and then you have to prove your gayness to people. Sometimes I feel like that shame with having to prove my Asianness to people, or to prove like the biracial aspect, which is a really weird thing. But I would say that around struggling with that, the journey through that has always been one where self-acceptance and owning that has been more freeing than not. Yeah.
What kind of, do you have a lot of queer clients who go through your fitness classes?
I do. I'm popular with the gays. Why did I do that? Yeah, I do. And what I find is because I'm a male teacher, I teach yoga, and I mean, I'm a minority in my field. It's 80, 90% female. Like, I'm a very large person. I was 300 pounds. And so it is a really weird thing to be in a field in health and fitness and be overweight or obese and still be a presence and still be valued for my strength, my insight, my intelligence, and my ability to teach and convey a message. People look at the package and sometimes they miss the message. And so when I can connect to people on that level, they usually get it and they want to stay. And so I do have a lot of queer students that come. Yeah. I would say that I'm not a pro Lululemon straight white girl kind of teacher, but that's just me. My class tends to be fairly diverse and my students tend to be fairly diverse. And a really big thing that 3/4, I figured, we did some math the other day, 3/4 of the students that I have that come to my classes are English as a second language. English is not their primary language they grew up in. And so that's awesome to me personally. Yeah.
We had a question from the room about where we can check out your classes.
So I think up there's a link to my website. And yeah, on my website, there's a calendar, and the calendar will have my classes listed of where I'm teaching. I work for Good Life Fitness right now, and I teach my own classes on Zoom.
I'm just going to drop the link here because I think if people came in late, they might not have been able to.
And I'm doing like some special class. I actually, Lululemon actually has me doing a special class. I did a queer yoga class for them in June, and they want me to do a queer yoga series for them in November. I think it's coming up, hopefully. And I'm partnering with someone. We're going to do like a queer BIPOC class, which chakra healing. So each week we're going to deal with a different root chakra, and we're going to go up the system and function a class about unlocking that area and freeing energy from it. Also having a discussion and dialogue about the emotions and the psychology and the spirituality around those chakras. But like, if that's too esoteric, never mind, forget about that part. But hopefully Lululemon's doing that in November at the Queen Street one. Yeah. It's actually really close by to ACAS. It's near Queen and Spadina. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just realized that I have had some problems with the Google feedback form. So I'll send out an email for folks with the feedback form, and also it'll have the food voucher link once I figure that out. I'm sort of like new to Google Forms, but Yeah, we've got a little bit of time left. If do folks have other questions? While I sort this out.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I guess maybe I can use this opportunity to talk about some of the other sessions that are coming up. If you haven't already seen in the registration link. So tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern time, same time as this one, we have Tim Lagman, who is a podcaster and a sex educator, as well as a sex worker, who is going to do a workshop on communication skills for better sex, which I'm really excited about. I saw sort of the presentation he was working on, and it looks really fun. And Tim is just such a vivacious personality. He's really vulgar and really funny. Yeah. And then on Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern, we have an intergenerational panel discussion that's called Age and Asians, where we're going to have somebody in their early 50s, somebody in their late 30s, and someone in their early 20s, all talking about different issues facing Asian men who have sex with men, which is really cool. That was a doozy to coordinate, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And then on Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, we have got Damien Dragon, who is one of the first mainstream Asian adult performers, who's going to come in and have a conversation with us, and that's going to be super fun. Yeah, there's just a whole bunch of really cool the 3 other workshops that are coming up. Yeah, we might actually also do a little slam social possibly later in the month that's like completely separate from this, but they were like, do you want to do a social? And I was like, yeah, if people are into doing an in-person social, that'd be kind of cute.
By later in the month, you mean September though, right?
Yes, September. Yeah. Oh, also, you know, this is kind of a good time to plug that if you haven't got your monkeypox vaccine, ACAS has been running monkeypox vaccine clinics for a bit. So you can find some information. I think that they're still running them, or they have resources to direct folks. Just because monkeypox it's on the rise. It's here in Toronto. So you know, ACAS is not just about HIV, but it's sort of like a public health organization. So they were really on the forefront of getting monkeypox vaccines out, which is really exciting. Yeah, I still can't get this Google form to work, but I will email folks who attended this workshop and send them the feedback form. I think I need to alter the permissions or something. It's a technical thing.
Yeah, it says you need permission.
Yeah, I know. I messed that up. I think I don't know if I did it correctly.
Did you want to close the recording down in case anyone wants to ask their question?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay.
Over the loan.
Yeah. I'll turn off the recording. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.